Our next guest is a former player, lightly opinionated. His name's Hans Olsen. He's now on 1280 The Zone in Salt Lake City for a long time now. How many years have you been doing that up in Salt Lake?
12 years.
12 years.
12 years on
1280 The Zone.
Yeah, 12 years.
That's
it's
great.
funny you're talking about the best of. So you take the best of, Hans and Scotty. We do 3 hours of radio every day. They trim it down about 2.5 minutes. And you can have the best of 2.5 minutes podcast.
It's a quick hitter, yeah.
It's awesome, man. It's a lot of fun. Been working with Scotty for 5 years now, almost
Great guy.
going into 6th, and we're dominating on sports radio and having a blast.
My favorite redhead, that includes some of my in-laws. He's fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about the big question today for us. What would you give up for BYU to be in a Power 5 conference? And I said I'd give up the national championship. I'd give up the Heisman Trophy because that doesn't do BYU any good now. It was great then. I love it. It was amazing. Guess what? The future is now.
Yeah.
I said I'd give up my left pinky toe.
Really?
Yeah.
An entire toe?
Yeah, I don't use it.
Not part of it.
What about the pinky off the hand?
What running lot?
Nope.
First knuckle up, so you get to keep like just the stub of it.
You know, if I was settled down in my dating life and I wasn't looking for,
Is that too weird?
I would.
You didn't need a pinky to woo a woman.
Yeah, like that could just be a turn off. Like, he doesn't have a pinky, so I don't.
That's a deal breaker.
My gosh, he's handsome, but I can't deal with that pinky.
Can't match up. Do you have two pinkies? No? Okay.
Hey, can you hold my hand? Can you imagine us holding hands? It just won't work.
Okay, what
What
would you give up for Power 5 inclusion for BYU?
Anything. My name in the record books at BYU in the history. I think any name, any jersey on the stadium, all the jerseys on the stadium, anything. To be included in a Power 5 conference, anything. Because like you said, the future is most important. So when it comes to BYU records or names or championships or any of those things, then I'd give anything. If it came to anything personal, I wouldn't give nothing because it doesn't.
No biggies.
To me, it's like, well, I'm not giving nothing of mine.
Right.
But I would give up my name. I'd give up anybody else's name, anything.
Yeah.
They need to be in a Power 5. It's that important.
Here's my main concern with the future in this. This is out of BYU's control. I don't think that BYU can control whether they get into a Power 5. Now, BYU could certainly have a season that would push them into the conversation more, which UCF has, and most of the teams that got invited had a season to validate themselves. Ask Utah about 04 and 08, right, Hans? But there's other things that go into this. So I think BYU is what it is, and if they get invited, they get invited, which is kind of a worrisome feeling to me.
It is. It's worrisome, but it's also so important. You know, we're talking about what we'd give up. It's what you would get if you got it. You know, and I know it's out of their hands.
Yes, the value is so high that it's
Value so
whatever.
high.
Yeah,
we're talking about $38 million checks, and I think we're just at the base of what we're going to get started in some of this new contract negotiation. It's going to reach into the 40s, 45s, and 50s. $50 million checks that are cut just on distribution. I know that we're kind of waiting for news on BYU and the new ESPN contract. Every one of us is patiently waiting. We know it's close. We've been told it's close. We've been told it's imminent. It's going to happen. But I would say high side, what is it, 10 million? You know, I know
10
that
would be incredible.
it would be incredible.
Yes,
like
that'd be more than the AAC.
My conservative kind of estimate would be somewhere between 6 and 8 million. Like that's just kind of my thoughts
on par with the AAC.
on what that contract is. We're talking about teams now that are getting a $38 million, close to $40 million check at the end of a football season just on distribution. So BYU stands to gain so much from it, and it is, like you said, Jeremy, it's completely out of their hands. The only thing they can do is win. You know, just win and dominate. They've scheduled all these Power 5 teams. You got to win and dominate. In order to win and dominate, you got to spend. And I know it's a private university, so we can't see all their spending. I've talked to some of the staff that's left, that was here before, that's now gone, and it sure doesn't feel like their spending was on par with the teams they're currently scheduling.
Spending specific to coaches' salaries, to facilities. What are you referring to?
Yeah, all those things.
Okay.
Yeah, just talking in all those things, and facilities and salaries.
Just overall resources and
And Brian, I'm sure you've had those conversations. I know you were close with the staff that left, and I'm sure you've had those conversations with those guys. I think BYU does a really good job of limiting the amount of talk that goes on while people are here. but I've had a lot of great conversations with individuals that have left, and it's apparent to me that the spending isn't where it needs to be in order to succeed at the level you need to succeed for a Power 5 conference to look at you.
And I've had those conversations too, and it's not necessarily a negative thing or a bad thing, the way they say it. Going to, moving on and going to other programs, I think the goal and the perspective is much different, right? I mean, at other schools, you can say, we want football is everything, we want to pour all the money. You can't really do that here at BYU, right? Because the church and what the main overall goal and the mission is.
It's a different way of doing things. Like the Marriott Center Annex was completely paid for before it was built, which is sound financially.
It is. It's great.
But if you're going to push into the future, perhaps that's tough. And I get what you're saying.
And from what I understand, not only was it built, I think it's 5 years out?
Oh, it had money
set to maintain.
Yeah.
I think not only do you have to build it, you have to have. I think it's a 5-year plan of maintenance.
I thought they had it in perpetuity.
Oh, really?
Which is incredible if that's the case, right?
Yeah.
But that was a challenge, and Tyler Haws was told when he came to BYU, there'll be an annex when you get back from your mission.
Yeah.
It barely got there for TJ Haws, right, for his sophomore year. But I guess what you're alluding to is if BYU is going to level up, they're going to have to level up in other areas.
Yeah, they got to
which
play.
is the challenge.
Play well.
Now, one thing that we said that they can control is the wins, right? And I mean, if the finances and the revenue isn't going to be there because the goals and it's just different objectives, don't you think having a winning record, and we talk about this all the time, scheduling, lighter opponents, you think that's going to be helpful?
So that's a tough one. It's a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because if you schedule down, nobody's interested.
I don't think you can have
ESPN
both,
wouldn't be
right?
interested.
Yeah.
So I feel like Tom Holmoe's done an amazing job with the schedule. I actually just tweeted out the next 2 years of Power 5 conference teams that you play. And you see the SEC 3 times, you see the Big Ten 3 or 4 times.
And they're coming to Provo.
And you see the Pac-12. So he's done a fantastic job. I actually think that his feet are being held to the fire a bit because ESPN wants these big-name games. Otherwise, it's not intriguing to them. And we've all seen what happens kind of later part of the season. Nobody cares. Nobody goes to the games. Nobody's really watching. And
if BYU's 7-1, they would.
ESPN buries them.
But they're not.
Yeah, they probably would. If they were 7-1,
or if they're
if they
6-2 plus
had a big run, then it would.
Yeah.
But yeah, Brian, I think that there is a necessity to actually have to schedule some of these teams.
I see.
Keep the roster intriguing. Sorry, not the roster, but the schedule.
I see it like this. So I got my scholarship taken from San Diego State, right?
Best thing ever.
Best thing ever happened to me. Thank you, Brady Hoke. Gary Anderson, first year at Utah State, first one to offer me a scholarship. BYU very next week offers me a scholarship, and with everything honor code, things like that. And this is coming from a double minority, Black, not Mormon. And I was literally dreading all the stories that they were telling me. You can't wear your earrings. You can't have your beard. I was like, I just got this.
Yeah.
I just started growing this out. Finally went through puberty.
Yeah.
And
I'm keeping this.
I'm keeping this. And the thing that changed and really made the honor code go away and everything else, go away was the wins.
Yeah.
It was being ranked, seeing all the bowl game swag, and it was literally the 11-2, 11-3, whatever the case is. We knocked out this person. We knocked out this person. How many consecutive sellouts?
Man, you had some good games. You had some good years.
And I'm blessed to be at the end of that, right?
Yeah.
2009. And so, to me, I feel like to have those kids that BYU can get, where this is the Alabama for, a recruit like myself, right? But recently you see kids that are going to Utah State or going to smaller schools from a brand recognition because they have those wins and they do have a little bit more, I would say, program clout at the moment.
We just saw one of the top safeties in the state sign with Utah State. Yep. That's the reality now.
It's a new day.
Yeah, it's a new day. We just saw one of the top prospects in the country from Honolulu, Hawaii. I think he's a linebacker. He was the prototypical BYU get. Like you look at his Twitter account, it's LDS.org is his Twitter thing. Like this kid's on the coast of Honolulu, and he is BYU prototypical kid, and he signed with Utah. And there were offers from Nebraska and other schools. And when I went through and researched this kid, he didn't even have a BYU offer. So that leads you to one or two things. Either BYU didn't feel like they could compete with the teams that were offering, or they didn't think he was good enough and completely missed. I would take number one over number two because I think our staff is very competent and would see that this kid is excellent. So Yeah, Brian, to your point, I think we're seeing a lot of kids that would typically hit. They're missing.
Yeah.
And it's because of wins. You know, Utah State has now got wins. They got a couple of wins against BYU. They got 10, 11 wins in the book last year. And Gary Anderson's going up there, and they're starting to churn, and they got a lot of guys in the NFL. So it's higher level competition. And I think all three of us, and I think anybody that's played for BYU or has been a part of BYU, it's tough to stand back and watch this.
Yeah.
Brian, I'm sure like it's gravel in your guts just like it's gravel in my guts.
It is.
And I hate when Brian's guts are gravel.
I know, man. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants it.
You know, the kid that you're referring to, you know, I think a couple of my former players or teammates had some relationships with him and engagement. And to see that, you know, announcement, that's really what I was referring to. And I was like, that's tough.
Because it's not what
it's tough. So
what we're used to.
So to me, I mean, there's all these variables that are in place, you know, and I think as far as what you can control, I really believe the best formula would be to have the Boise State model. You know, you take one or two big giants, you can compete with them. If you do get injured because you're going all out, you're fine because, you know, your second, third string guys on the roster can still compete with the cupcakes down the road.
Yeah. I just wonder if ESPN steps in and says, hey, we're kind of tired of putting Toledo on our airwaves.
It's probably a middle ground, right, between what BYU's doing and what you're saying.
Huge middle ground. But I would also say that over the next 2 years, they've leaned completely to the heavy side of it.
Yes, which I've been vocal about, like, hey, what are we doing? What's the point of this?
You know, Brian, one of the things I was thinking about, too, is it's a tough situation because let's say that Kalani puts together 9 wins this year, and that's possible. In my opinion, that's possible. You got to split Boise State and Utah State, and then you got to start 2-2 in the first 4. If you start 2-2 in the first 4 and split Boise State and Utah State, there's 9 wins on that schedule.
Yeah.
And if he did that on a certain contract year where other Power 5 schools are looking and others are tanking and having issues, and they're like, well, look at this guy. He went from 4 wins and took him to 9 wins with a very difficult schedule. You've got guys that are coming to the front door like your former coach and saying, here's 3.5.
Right, yeah.
And I know that your former coach loved it here to a certain extent.
Oh, yeah.
And he's like, well, I can't even pass up 3.5. I watched Matt Wells, who is a Utah State grad and loves Logan. And Texas Tech comes in and was winning and very successful. And Texas Tech comes in after they went a 3-win season to a, 10 or 11-win season. Texas Tech's like, here's 3.6. And he's like, bye, Logan. And here's the problem. Somebody comes in and offers that here to Kalani. If he does have a great year, he's gone. And it's not just Kalani. That's any BYU coach. Yeah. Any BYU coach. You put together a schedule like this, they have success. The Power 5 comes calling. And BYU's not going to stop them. BYU won't match a 3.5.